Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a topic I know is on a lot of your minds, standardized testing. You reached out wanting to sort of get a better handle on its role, its impact in education, and, well, that's what we're going to explore today.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we've gathered quite a range of materials. We're looking at research from Walden University on, like, test anxiety and scores. A
Okay.
history of educational testing from Princeton, some critical views and alternatives from Rethinking Schools,
Rethinking schools, right.
insights on equitable assessment, pros and cons from Oxford Learning, and a study on the broader effects from the Educational Research Center. So quite a bit to draw on.
Okay, quite a lot there. So our goal then is to kind of walk through the history, weigh the arguments for and against, get into that whole test anxiety thing, and, look at alternatives, ready to dive in.
Absolutely. It's actually pretty fascinating when you look at how these tests even started. Formal written testing in the U.S., it really kicked off around the mid-19th century.
The 19th, okay.
Yeah, moving away from oral exams. It was linked to this shift, schools trying to educate the masses, not just the elite few.
Right, a huge expansion. So these early tests, they weren't actually designed to compare students or schools initially.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
But almost right away, that's how people started using them. There was this idea about ensuring fair opportunities. But debates about fairness, about whether the tests were fair for comparison, they started pretty much from the get-go.
Interesting. And they focused on basics, like reading and arithmetic.
Mostly, yeah. Though people understood education was broader. But these early tests, they were seen as like tools for reform in this growing school system, getting some systematic info.
A bit of a scientific approach, maybe?
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to connect with what came later, the mental testing, intelligence measurement in the late 19th century.
Exactly. That definitely influenced educational testing.
Yeah.
So by the early 20th century, you see intelligence and achievement testing becoming much more common in schools.
Why the increase then? Just administrative need.
That was a big part of it, yeah. Bigger systems needed managing. Plus, this appeal of, scientific objective assessment was growing.
And technology played a role too, didn't it?
Yeah.
Between the world wars, making testing easier to do on a large scale.
Yes, definitely. Advancements in, like, scoring and administration made things more efficient.
Okay.
Then, after World War II, testing really got tied up with bigger societal pushes, racial equality, access to education, even the whole tech race, like with the National Defense Education Act in 1958.
The space race era push.
And then jumping forward quite a bit, you get No Child Left Behind in 2001.
Ah, yes, NCLB. That really boosted the amount of testing, didn't it? Especially grades 3 to 8.
Hugely. Annual testing in reading and math became, central. And while the aim was accountability achievement, it also really ramped up the concerns and criticisms.
Okay, so let's get into those concerns. I mean, one thing you hear is teachers feeling like they're just testers now.
Right. Constantly prepping for or giving some kind of standardized test, it can feel relentless.
And then the tests themselves. Critics ask, can multiple choice really measure everything? Skills, deep understanding.
It's a fundamental question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Can bubbling in an answer show critical thinking or problem solving in a complex situation?
Probably not fully.
Yeah.
And do teachers find the data from these big tests actually useful for planning day-to-day lessons for individual kids? Some seem to doubt that.
That's another point often raised. And then there's the competition aspect.
Oh, yeah.
It can create this maybe unhealthy competition, not just students, but schools, districts.
Yeah.
The focus shifts from collaboration to just rankings.
And this seems really important, the link to socioeconomic status. Research suggests SES can predict scores, like on the SAT, maybe even better than the schooling itself.
That's a major finding, yes. It brings up huge questions about equity, access to test prep, all of that.
Absolutely.
If you look historically, in other countries, using tests for early selection, streaming kids, that caused a lot of anxiety for parents.
And probably discouraged kids who didn't test well early on.
Exactly. Plus, historically, there wasn't actually a ton of research on the long-term effects of all this testing on students and teachers beyond just test accuracy.
So we were testing a lot without fully knowing the impact.
Arguably, yes. And we can't ignore the self-esteem factor. Using tests to sort kids, well, that can be really tough on those who consistently score lower.
Yeah, that makes sense. Which brings us neatly to test anxiety.
Right. That feeling, the worry, the fear before, during, or after a test. affects all ages.
And it's not just a feeling, is it? The Walden University study actually looked at physical signs, too.
It did, yeah. Fourth graders, a state science test, they used questionnaires and measured pulse rates right before the test.
Okay, so what was the connection? What did they find?
Well, here's the interesting bit. They found a significant, moderate negative relationship between the pulse rates just before the test and the scores.
So higher pulse rate, more anxiety, maybe lower score.
That's what the correlation suggested, yes. But, and this is key, they didn't find a significant link between the anxiety report on the questionnaire and the scores.
Huh. That's odd. Maybe the questionnaire captured general feelings, not the in-the-moment stress. Or kids aren't always aware of how anxious they are.
Could be either or both. The research also points out lots of things affect test anxiety: gender, biology, age, SES, culture, pressure about the subject, how good you think you are at it.
It's complex. And the causes. Expectations, maybe, from yourself, parents, teachers.
Definitely. And the test format itself can play a role. Computer versus paper.
Ah, right. Computerized testing. That's often pitched as being better, right? Faster, more flexible, maybe less anxiety for some.
It has potential advantages, yeah, like self-pacing, maybe less direct competition feel, but for students not comfortable with computers, the format itself can cause anxiety. Some studies show higher reported anxiety on computer tests, even if scores aren't that different.
Interesting. And time limits seem to be a big factor for anxious students.
Very much so. That pressure can really impact their performance. Research suggests they might need significantly more time to perform at the same level as less anxious peers.
Wow. So what helps? Relaxation techniques, better study skills, practice tests.
Those are the common strategies, yes. Teacher support is huge too. But it's worth noting, research shows that just lowering self-reported anxiety doesn't always mean better test scores follow.
Okay, so it's not a simple fix. Given all these issues, the limitations, the anxiety, it makes sense. People are looking for alternatives, right? More equitable ways to assess learning.
Absolutely. There's a big push for what's called authentic assessment.
Authentic, meaning?
Meaning students apply learning in meaningful, sort of real-world ways, not just recalling facts for a test.
Okay, like what kind of things?
Think portfolios showing work over time, or performance tasks, projects where students actually do something to show their understanding.
I see. So it gives a broader picture of what a student can do.
Exactly, a richer picture. And it can also encourage teachers to reflect more on student work and their own teaching.
And this ties into the idea of an equitable assessment system, making sure all students have a chance to succeed.
Precisely. An equitable system aims for ambitious outcomes for everyone, using approaches that are bias-free, balanced, and value individual strengths.
So what does that look like in practice? What are the components?
Well, several key things. High-quality assessment by skilled teachers, assessing the whole child, cognitive, emotional, physical. Assessing deeper learning, like application and analysis, not just recall. That authentic real-world assessment we mentioned.
Right.
Also, reflective self and peer assessment, getting students involved. And socially conscious assessment, considering culture experiences.
That sounds crucial.
Very. Plus collaborative learning and assessment, differentiated assessment, tailoring things to individual needs and making it student-driven and student-centered, giving them voice and choice.
That's a lot of pieces. It sounds like a much more holistic view.
It is. And underlying it all is the need for high expectations from teachers, believing students can achieve.
That belief matters.
Immensely. Along with enough time to learn mastery learning, where students get support until they get it, and high-quality teaching, of course. And ongoing formative assessment is key.
Formative assessment. Assessment for learning, not just of learning.
Exactly. Clear goals, checking understanding along the way, giving feedback, adjusting teaching. It's a continuous loop.
Okay, so pulling this all together, standardized testing, it's got this long, complicated history.
Serve different purposes, accountability, tracking progress.
But it also comes with significant baggage, doesn't it? Equity concerns, questions about what it truly measures, the impact on well-being, that whole anxiety piece.
Definitely. And the move towards alternatives, towards more equitable systems, it really shows a desire for something more holistic, more supportive of actual learning.
So here's a thought to leave everyone with. Thinking about this history, these debates, how might assessment change in the future? How do we best serve all learners, with all their diverse needs and potential?
And what role should standardized tests play, if any, in that future?
It's a big question. It really is.
And if you want to dig deeper into this, maybe look into the assessment practices in your own local schools. Or check out resources from groups like the Michigan Assessment Consortium or Rethinking Schools. They have a lot on alternative models and equitable education.
Great suggestions. Lots to think about there.